Hi, everyone. Okay, so I guess the sound is okay. It sounds like that from here, at least. So, dear everyone, welcome and thank you for joining this panel on LGBTIQ homelessness in Europe. My name is Elise Christensen. I'm an international advisor in FREE, the Norwegian Organization for Gender and Sexual Diversity, and I will be moderating this conversation. Access to adequate housing is a human right, and everyone deserves a safe place that is home, regardless of their class, ethnicity, color, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, level of ability, or other factors affecting our identity. Despite this, we know that a disproportionate amount of LGBTI youth are at risk of experiencing homelessness. And we also know that while LGBTI organizations are working to support homeless youth and combat the issue, for many others, it's still an invisible issue. That is one of the many reasons why I'm very happy and excited to invite you to this conversation today. And we are lucky to have with us representatives from 4 national organizations working on LGBTIQ youth homelessness. We have Transfusia from Poland, Ljubljana Pride from Slovenia, ACT UK, and Viva LGBTQ Plus from Wales, as well as a representative from ILGA Europe. In this conversation, we will there's many things we could talk about regarding this topic, but in this conversation, we would like to hear from the organizations in terms of what is the actual experience and situation in the context, and talk about a bit how we work with this issue. So before we go along with that conversation, I'd like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves. Yes. So let's get the panelists in the room. Just give us a second, so we can also, panelists, if you can hear me, we're also just going to be seeing you in the room on the screen. So just a second here. Great, now we can see all of you. Hello. So as I said, if you could kindly introduce yourselves with your name, pronoun, title, and the organization that you're working with. Who wants to start?
I can start because I'm on the left top, so you can go in an order. My name is Nadia Gusakovskaya, and I'm a senior programs officer at ILGA Europe, and my pronouns are she, they.
Vesna?
Okay, so I guess I'm next. I'm Vesna. I use pronouns she and her, and I'm a coordinator of a program for reducing the risk of housing exclusion and homelessness for LGBTIQ plus youth at Ljubljana Pride.
And hello, I'm Alex. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the lead worker with Viva LGBTIQ, and we're part of the Tea Pride project in North Wales.
Hello, my name is Emilia Wiśniewska. My pronouns are she, her. I'm executive board president and advocacy officer in Transfusia Foundation, working for trans people in Poland.
Hi, everybody. Can I just say this is really exciting? My name's Jo. I'm the campaigns policy and research lead for AKT, and my pronouns are she, her.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and great to see you. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us for this conversation. Let's say we'll start off with a bit of an introduction. So thank you very much for being willing to give us that introduction and for taking on the quite impossible task of doing this in a very short amount of time. The floor is yours.
I'm very excited. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be part of this discussion. And I believe this is a crucial time for this discussion to happen and the action to follow, because the housing instability and homelessness impact heavily on LGBTI youth across Europe. Unfortunately, LGBTI youth homelessness still remains hidden in Europe, and we lack the data and the robust research to fully understand the prevalence of LGBTI youth homelessness in Europe. In 2020, the Fundamental Rights Agency released a survey that estimates that 1 in 5 members of the LGBTI community experience homelessness, rising to 1 in 3 for trans people and nearly 40% for intersex people. So the lack of knowledge, of concrete knowledge across the EU states leads to a lack of targeted services. There is also a scarcity of targeted policies and support programs for LGBTI homeless youth. This April, ILGA Europe, in association with True Colors United, published a report on the experiences of European LGBTI organizations that work on the issues of LGBTI youth homelessness. In this survey, nearly 3/4, 72% of respondents indicated that no national policy exists specifically addressing the issues of LGBTI youth homelessness. Over half of respondents, 59%, reported a lack of governmental support for programs that focus on LGBTI youth homelessness, including nearly half, 47%, reporting a lack of funding support for such programs. We also have to face the fact that in the wider society, as well as sometimes among activists, there is a lack of understanding what homelessness is and how it manifests. When most people think of a homeless person, they tend to think of someone sleeping rough on the streets. And yes, rough sleeping is the most visible and dangerous form of homelessness. But being homeless means not having a home. So you can be homeless even if you have a roof over your head. You can be considered homeless when you stay in hostels, squats, B&Bs, in overcrowded accommodation and concealed housing, such as the floors and sofas of friends and family. When it comes to reasons for LGBTI youth homelessness, the most prevalent cause is identity-related family conflict, as reported by 71% respondents in the ILGA Europe survey. Undeniably, the pandemic and deepening socio-economic inequalities further exacerbated the situation of LGBTI youth. Over half respondents, 56%, reported that their work has been affected by the pandemic, with one organization saying, and I'm quoting here, "We have seen a heightening of the conflict level in domestic environments. Being unable to live their usual double life and gain the emotional support from other peers who are also LGBTI persons with ethnic minority background, therefore increases tensions and have increased the risk of exposure among family members." End of quote. Another crucial cause for LGBTI homelessness is the lack of institutional support and social rejection. As the European Federation of National Organizations Working with the Homeless, FIANSA, reports, the most common challenges for homeless services to address LGBTI youth homelessness include the organization not knowing how to approach the topic of LGBTI identities, not being confident in its ability to speak about LGBTI issues, and fearing that some LGBTI young people will experience violence or abuse in the service setting if their sexual orientation or gender identity is made known. When it comes to social rejection as a reason for LGBTI youth homelessness, we must see the link between social rejection and the rise of anti-LGBTI rhetoric, anti-trans attacks and narratives, and anti-gender movement. We must join the dots and see how rising hate speech, far-right and conservative rhetoric reinforce stigmatization of LGBTI people and ultimately, among many other consequences, affect the number of LGBTI young people who find nowhere to go and no one to turn to. It is important to acknowledge that LGBTI homeless young people is not a homogeneous group. Being a trans person, a non-binary person, intersex person, sex worker, a migrant, a refugee, an LGBTI person with any form of disability, a Black LGBTI person, or an LGBTI person of minority ethnic background will inevitably affect your experience of homelessness, heighten the risk of becoming and staying homeless, and due to social stigma and other factors will affect your experience of and the access to services. So we have to be vigilant and keep an intersectional approach in any strategies of addressing LGBTI youth homelessness. The collaboration between sectors, systems, and services in addressing LGBTI youth homelessness is pivotal. To provide an example from Norway, the Free Competence Child Welfare is working with and providing the child welfare services, Barnevernet, with the competence they need to take care of LGBTIQ youth needs. We need to keep the spirit of solidarity and collaboration. I believe whatever strategies and answers are to be forged to address LGBTI youth homelessness, it's crucial to listen to people affected and those organizations who work closely with LGBTI homeless youth. I'm excited that we will have this opportunity today to hear some of the voices of people working closely with the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natsea, for that great introduction. I think it really is a good background for further discussion. So I'd like to start with a question for all of you. Within your context, could you tell us a bit about what is the situation related to LGBTIQ youth homelessness in your specific context?
We're kind of picking up on a point that was made in that wonderful introduction, that COVID has really intensified a lot of the issues, just because we know from working with our young people that they are having to spend a lot more time with family who perhaps don't understand or maybe even be actively hostile against LGBTIQ identities. And haven't had as much of the option to spend time with found family, supportive peers, and have perhaps some of those escape routes. So it's really intensified a lot of people's experiences. And we're at a position where, certainly in Wales, so we're quite lucky working with Pride, with Llamau and Devonshire County Council, that we're providing what is the first LGBTIQ plus specific supported accommodation in Wales at a time where, so we finally have one, but we're at a time where we're already seeing an increased demand and an increased need.
Yeah, I think just building on what Alex has said, I think COVID's also had a huge impact on the young people we support, and largely because the vast majority of the young people we support are hidden homeless, so for surfing, couch surfing, and then lockdown, or what has now been various iterations of lockdown, have meant that sofa surfing is illegal or restricted. So it's meant that we've seen more young people rough sleeping or coming to our services. So for instance, we had a look at this. We saw a 118% increase in new referrals to our services between April to August in 2020, when we compared that to the same time period in 2019. And then just looking at overall caseload, we saw a 71% increase in caseload between 2020 to 2021. And I think it's largely because a lot of the policy focus here has been concentrated on supporting those who are rough sleeping, which of course is really important, but it's meant that there's been quite huge gaps in provision for young people. So yeah, just building on what Alex has said, I think COVID has kind of just accelerated levels of homelessness amongst queer young people, particularly in the UK.
So yeah, we're seeing some similarities with what you said in Slovenia too. But the biggest consequence of COVID that we're seeing is a decline in mental health with the young people we work with, and also with the people who were included in the research we did in the last 6 months. We're seeing people are saying that 60% of the respondents see their mental health declining. 76% are reporting that they're having more anxiety than before. And of course, this is something that we're really trying to be mindful of, because our research showed that mental health is a really important factor when it comes to housing exclusion and being at risk of homelessness. So I think for us, COVID at this point is mostly showing its teeth when it comes to mental health of the young people we're working with.
In our Polish case, it's hard to me to well define the situation in case of homelessness. I can notice that the issue of mental health condition is greatly deteriorating among my community, my trans community, within last year, not only due to COVID, which is a case for all of our countries probably, but also due to the political situation and political climate in Poland that is greatly hostile towards LGBTIQ people and maybe trans people specifically, as the community was politically targeted within the last few months. And this is something that greatly affects mental condition of all the people in the community and makes their living places unsafe. No matter whenever if they have a place to stay, it's often not a good place to stay, and it is a reason to look for other options. But it's not an easy task to find another option, especially when you're a young LGBTI person in Poland, with very often with no support from your parents.
Thank you, everyone. So maybe building on that last comment from Emilia, I would like to hear a bit more about how you're working to combat this issue and what you're actually doing in your organizations. So maybe, Emilia, if I could ask you first, I mean, working in this context of Poland, how are you working on this issue and on supporting LGBTIQ youth, homeless youth, and what sort of potentials do you see in that work?
Some of you were talking before about collecting data, and this is very important to plan and provide services, the services that would be well designed and targeted. We lack the data that would be comprehensive. This is something that can change within a few months, as we are waiting for the data coming from two pretty huge and comprehensive social studies made by Transfuzja Foundation and another one made by Campaign Against Homophobia, and this would give us some information about what direction should we take. And in regard to what we are doing right now, it's very hard to work as we don't have resources for targeted services for trans young people experiencing homelessness or in the risk of homelessness, and we cannot count on public services too much, as they are not very trans friendly, and that makes our work unnecessarily complicated, as it is very often that in a case of helping for one person, there are many individuals and few organizations involved. And what we are actually doing together is trying to use our resources as much as we can without going for public services and asking them for support, as we cannot consider them very helpful in many cases. So the problem is that our work is in great extent not the best that we could do. It would be way better if we could cooperate with public services and count on their support, but it's not the case for now. What is changing and will change probably within next months in more local Warsaw context is that we are on a way to reopen LGBT emergency shelter in Warsaw. There was a place like that something like 5 years ago. I had this honor to work there, and we desperately need a place like that. Thanks for the cooperation with municipal government in Warsaw, we are in a way to reopen the place. That would be organized by Lambda Warszawa Association in cooperation with Fundacja Transfuzja. The case is that we still need our funding. Like the place would be funded by municipal government in part, but we also need to find our share in the budget, and for that we had to go for the community and ask them for money, which is pretty maybe not the best option, even if LGBTIQ community in Poland is greatly mobilized within, and it is changing in a very good and impressive direction within last year. But still, it would be better if we could count on other sources of funding. But in that case, we don't have a choice, and we have to ask for solidarity for all our community that is more and more into this kind of participating in community work.
Thank you very much. I think you're highlighting several very important issues and challenges concerning funding, concerning lack of political governmental support, etc. Maybe to move on to Vesna. I know that you are, among other things, are running an innovative program on private housing. And you've also, as you mentioned very recently, launched some research, I believe. So could you tell us a bit more, just in general, about your work and also some challenges that you see?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, we were able to do research in Slovenia thanks to ILGA Europe supporting us. And we did a nationwide research about the living conditions of LGBTIQ plus youth in Slovenia. Because we were wondering, also, what is the state of affairs? How are young people living? Not only the ones that are rough sleeping or maybe more visibly at risk of homelessness, but also the ones who are living in the invisible homelessness, like we already mentioned, sleeping on the couches of friends and family. This research was crucial for our advocacy work. We just now published our report last week. We had the conference where we hosted amazing guests from Fianza and True Colors United and Torino Housing. So we're kind of gathering all this information to arm ourselves for national level advocacy for now. In Poland, when it comes to the political climate in Slovenia, we just today joined a few very infamous countries when it comes to not respecting human rights in Slovenia.
Yes, I think you're breaking up a bit. I'm not sure if it's the connection or something else. Let's see if we can get you back quickly. Seems like Vesna froze a bit, so shall we maybe meanwhile continue to someone else in the panel, then we can go back to that to those points mentioned by Vesna. Let's give it a few seconds. I see she jumped off, so let's see if she can if she's able to join us again.
Okay.
Hello.
Sorry for that.
No problem. Good to have you back.
So, do you want me to continue, or did you move on to other questions?
No, please continue. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. As I said, our political climate not very friendly to our community at the moment. So the research will greatly help when it comes to advocacy and securing national funds to support our services. But as you already mentioned, yes, we are doing an innovative service for our LGBTIQ plus youth in Slovenia. And as Emilia said, and as Poland is turning to their community, so are we. So we developed this model of crisis accommodation, short-term housing program for LGBTIQ plus youth in distress, where we have this group of amazing volunteers who are providing housing in their own homes. So we have, for now, it's testing, we're in the testing period, but we have 6 people, 6 volunteers who are members of our communities or allies. And they are prepared to host a young person for approximately 2 weeks. In their home, either on their couch or in a spare bedroom, and also provide this kind of social support that you get when you're living in a safe space that is welcoming. And in that time, we are working intensely with these young people. We are providing different kinds of support, administrative support, counseling, a very hands-on advocacy when it comes to social workers, when it comes to family, when it comes to doctors, and so on. So this is kind of what we're testing out now, and hope to make into a framework that will be also transferable to other communities. And for now, as far we're seeing great results. So as Emilia already said, community is very important when it comes to this, but we should not rely only on ourselves. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. And that's a very important point as well. Yeah, should we move on to Joe? Do you want to say a bit about the work that you are doing in ACT currently?
Yeah, sure. I guess in terms of direct service provision, firstly, so we have our own emergency accommodation. So we have Purple Door in London, which because of growing need, we're looking to expand. So we probably will have another Purple Door in London, and then we'll be expanding this across England as well. We also have a host program as well, so similar to what Vesna was speaking about. So young people can find temporary accommodation through AKT trained hosts. Usually it's around for about a month, I think, at the maximum. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, but usually short-term placements. And then because of this, just the financial insecurity that a lot of young people are facing, particularly at the moment, we also have been expanding support, financial support that we provide. So helping young people with deposits for a home, for instance, it's really important, particularly in cities like London, where deposits are just extortionately high. So that can be a huge barrier to trying to find safe accommodation. And then in terms of just in general, our caseworkers, they help young people with education, employment, housing support, advocacy in that sense. And then we have a youth engagement program as well. So that's more so sort of mentoring, and then we host like community hangouts, just so young people kind of just have a bit of an outlet as well, where they can just, have fun and just have sort of a safe space to go and talk to one another and that sort of thing, which has been particularly important with COVID. So more young people having to sort of stay in quite hostile environments, and just the rise of transphobic rhetoric in particular that we've seen in the UK over the last year in particular. So that's been really crucial, I think, in terms of building resilience and just having that mental, just prioritizing young people's mental health. And then I guess in terms of my role with advocacy, so our key focus as well is around this sort of data collection piece. So we know that it's really difficult to understand how many LGBTQ plus young people are homeless in the UK because of just poor monitoring of sexual orientation, gender identity, or even when you look at how gender identity is monitored, it's really restrictive. So we're not getting the full picture of what's sort of going on, despite the fact that we know we're seeing more young people turning to our services. It's still quite sort of seen in the UK, and I know across wider Europe as well, as a marginal issue, which is quite frustrating when you're trying to advocate for policy change. So our kind of key focus, or my key focus will be on how we improve data collection on this issue. And then I think foresee quite a few challenges with that. Firstly, I think it's around how do you make services more inclusive? How do you create open spaces and inclusive environments so young people feel safe to disclose? How do we build trust amongst young people as well? You know, how do we ensure that young people understand how the data is being used? And it's not just like another thing, that data is being collected. Where is it going? What's the need to collect this information? I think sometimes there's a perception that you all kind of a concern, I should say, around how it's sort of related to housing. You know, what is the need to collect this information in particular? So I think that will be kind of a challenge as we go forward, and ensuring that service providers as well recognise the importance in asking this information. But I think in the UK, particularly, we've seen similar campaigns that have been done, for instance, in healthcare, so introducing sexual orientation monitoring as well. So I think there is some precedent that's been set. So I think in terms of trying to be positive, that's an opportunity, I think. So precedent's been set. So yeah, so our kind of key focus advocacy-wise is around that data collection piece going forward.
Thank you very much. Then Alex.
Hello. So yeah, I think quite simply, like, we are part of the Tia Pride project with LMI, who are a homelessness organisation, and Denbighshire County Council, so with local government, and kind of looking at that as being something of a pilot, being the first one in Wales. And we're wanting to build on that. So a big thing we're doing at the moment is a long period that we're working with all of the local authorities from across North Wales, providing training around LGBTIQ plus identities, awareness, the realities around homelessness, what we do know there, and trying to work with them on the importance, as Joseph's been saying, of that data collection. Because yes, we'll talk about kind of the hidden homeless, but you also then have almost your hidden LGBTIQ plus people within that homelessness population when we're not asking those questions. And I think something that is very common is a lot of people who would consider themselves allies, who are pro support and supportive of LGBTIQ plus people, are kind of saying, oh, as someone makes themselves aware to me, I would obviously be supportive, but it's kind of getting into that next step of flipping that conversation. And I think always other people have been saying that you've got to lay the table before they know they can come and sit at it. You've got to be actively encouraging and supportive before you're aware of anyone, so that they know that you're safe to come and have these conversations with. And we've got to be finding that information on intake as well, and support and throughout, and working with the other services that people will just be coming into contact with as part of their support. So not even the accommodation and the direct support, but the who they go to next in terms of trying to get live independently, to be able to get work, get jobs, get all this other support. So it's a big project that we're hoping to build out of what we're doing in Tia Pride.
Thank you. Really important points there as well. And I think we have a few follow-up questions for you, but before I move on to that, does any of you have any comments or questions for each other? Something that some of you have raised? Thoughts related to that?
Yeah, I was really intrigued by the what Vesna was saying about kind of the getting community involved and having that hosting program. And I wondered what it was like getting that going and getting the community involved to support each other.
Well, actually, thanks for the question. It was surprisingly easier than we thought it would be. So that really made us so happy, because we're asking a lot from these volunteers, you know? We're not asking them to financially support us or come and work with us for an hour or two a week, but we're asking them to open their home, to trust us, to trust the people who are entering their homes. They're also not compensation, so we were really skeptical about how we're going to get these people on board. And we just, for the pilot version of this program, we just put out a call on our social media and our emailing list. So it was like closed and small, and still we got like 20 people who responded so quickly. And we were so happy. And then we had this long process of training and talking to them. And in those 6 months, some of them found out that it's not what they thought and it's not for them. So the number declined, and then some people's housing situation changed. But at the end of those 6 months, we now have 6 people who are actively involved, not only in the service, but also they helped to develop the service. So we have this little community of people who are also know each other, and they have this great relationship, and they have a good relationship with us. And we believe this is the way to go, like to really have a good relationship with them. And so there is this mutual trust that it's crucial in this kind of service, I think.
Sounds brilliant.
I wanted to ask, actually, because I was listening and realizing that the need doubled or I think tripled in a way. Like there's so much going on, and I'm thinking about how much services, not only homeless related, but different kind of services you have to provide. I actually wanted to ask, what motivates you in terms of keeping going? I'm trying to understand about like inspiration and empowerment as well, because it's so easy to kind of succumb and be desperate. And I just wanted to ask you if you can share, what empowers you.
I can ask. Maybe it's hard to find a thing that would be inspiring in this situation, for sure. Sorry. For sure, what can be an inspiration is that we have, as a, let's say, organized part of the community, namely NGOs and informal groups, we have a huge community going just behind us, and we know we can count on them. And with that, to informal groups, this is very important. I would like to point it out. There is a huge expansion of informal groups in Poland, organized mainly by late teens, young adults. This is probably, it would be not an exaggeration to say that it's just a new generation of activists, and they dedicate their work in huge part for supporting activities. Even if they lack resources as well as NGOs, and actually even more, but they have their chances, their opportunities, and their tools to work for LGBTIQ young people in risk of homelessness. And this is a very rare thing that we can cooperate, especially in a situation when NGOs have some tools and lack some other tools, and informal groups can supply their tools and their capabilities that we lack. So this is very empowering and encouraging that we can count on this cooperation. And also, even if I said before that we usually just try to omit public services, this is also changing. As when I was listening to you, I just reminded that it was just yesterday when we were providing a workshop for some public service. So the situation is changing in a good direction in many aspects, even if in general it's pretty terrible.
Yeah, thank you for that. Does anyone else want to respond to Nazea's question as in terms of inspiration and motivation?
I mean, for sure, I believe the biggest motivation I personally have and our organization has is the community, you know, and what we're getting back from them, and seeing empowered young people who just need someone to listen to them or to support them in these small steps they're taking towards being more empowered, toward being more independent. And I think all of these small steps we can witness, you know, at least for me, those are the most important answers to the question why we're doing, seeing young people thrive. I mean,
I would agree with that, and continuing to like find allies in unlikely places where you weren't expecting them. So it helps really sustain it. It's a bit like when it's feeling hard and someone just comes out the woodwork, and it's a bit when you weren't expecting to find them in that place. It's a bit like, okay, that's just made this a little bit easier.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The unexpected allies, definitely. And I think young people with support, I think working remotely, it's sometimes difficult to sometimes see the impact of your work from a policy perspective as well. But hearing back from like our caseworkers around outcomes for young people, I think is definitely something that motivates me. And then also looking at, if we weren't advocating for policy change, who would be? So I think that's always important to consider as well, even when it gets sort of frustrating sometimes. It's important to just sort of remember, I guess, the wider picture or the bigger picture with stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe I can ask one follow-up question. You've touched upon in terms of collaboration with public services, so child welfare systems and social services in your context. Could you say a bit more about that? What are the opportunities to see, or what are the actual challenges with working particularly with getting more inclusive services, so to say? Who wants to go first?
I mean, I can go. We also included the mainstream services and the national services into our research. And the research showed that a lot of them are craving more knowledge, more training. So we are already working with some of them, but we are kind of planning to create a really informed capacity building trainings for our organizations here and also institutional services, of course. And we're gonna look up to True Colors United and their work that they're doing in America, because we're seeing, while we were talking, we saw a lot of similarities. We have a lot of faith-based services also in Slovenia that provides services for homeless people. So our next steps in having a more inclusive services in Slovenia is definitely a really good training framework that will also speak to them. And I think one of the best advice that I got from Gregory from True Colors United was meet them where they are. So not trying to be condescending, but just meet them where they are and work with them.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to have some thoughts around that?
I think we're we're quite lucky where we're at the moment with the Tea Pride project, because our local government is, so Public Services is the lead organisation on the project. They were the ones that really wanted, this was something that was really important for them to work in, was LGBTIQ plus homelessness. And as I say, we're all kind of like finding allies in unlikely places, that this is something they really wanted to champion, and being able to capitalise on that, but also making sure that engaging that local government and continuing that to be the focus as we try to expand what we're going to be doing, perhaps into other areas, is that it is remaining a part of the work that they're already doing in homelessness, but specialising it, because if we keep it too separate, I think the worry is that it absolves them of their responsibility, which this is still on them, is what it really much I think is the point that we want to have.
Anyone else wants to speak to that?
Yeah, I would like to add something. I'm just thinking about what we can offer for public services, like our workshops that we as Transfusia provide for many various places, including public services supporting people in crisis. And what we are doing is mostly giving a basic knowledge about transgender topics, but how it comes to, how it connects to our experience in supporting work. We know that people whose professional work is offering support and help for people in crisis, they have their experience, their knowledge, their ability to work with people in crisis. What we can add to their professional skills is some knowledge about how to accommodate this to work with trans people, for example. But we can do it through providing the basic knowledge about transgender issues and transgender topics. But what's sometimes no less important than that is to share our specific experience in working with trans people in crisis. And this is something that goes beyond some let's say basic training program that we come with to places like schools, businesses, public services, and we sometimes we discover that places that we are going to provide our workshop have some questions that are about something different than our training program. That they have very specific questions that they know pretty well sometimes what are their deficiencies. And what we can do with that is to follow them up with what we can supply for them. So if they can recognize what are their deficiencies in the work with, in the preparation for work with trans people, is our art of work that we find in years of our activities, and we do not have resources for some kinds of supporting work. They do. What they need is well-targeted professional set of professional skills that we can provide for them.
Great, thank you. So I think we were on a quite positive, motivating trail when you were talking also about the motivation and inspiration. And so let's try to take us back there a bit as well. And I'd like to ask you, In terms of combating the issue, what do you envision in the coming years? What is your your aim? And if you could mention maybe one or two things you think we need to get there. It's a question for all of you. Feel free to jump in.
I think for me, it's continuing to build as we can LGBTIQ plus specialist responses and services, and continuing to find out from data collection the extent that they are unfairly overrepresented, and continuing to plug that gap. And then on the other hand, sort of pincer attack, the building that education so that over time we're slowly being able to reduce the additional need that the LGBTIQ plus community faces when it comes to homelessness.
I think for me, ideally, we would have a society where no young person has to choose between who they are and having a safe home or access to a safe home. But I think the key things for us to sort of build on that and to get there, I think a stronger focus on prevention, early action. I'd like to see that guide housing policy. So we're not just talking about crisis point, but we're looking at prevention so we can stop young people from having to, experience like lifetimes of homelessness, and we can sort of stop that cycle. Because I think with young people, there's a real opportunity for us to do that. So we can prevent them, from, rough sleeping and experiencing street homelessness. And just sort of what Alex was saying as well, we need better data collection ultimately as well, not only to make services more inclusive, but then also to advocate for policy change. And then, of course, challenging what we're seeing, particularly at the moment, transphobia, racism, homophobia. Obviously, these have always been here, but it seems like at the moment these things are really heightening. So challenging that and just addressing the inequities that exist, particularly when we're talking about housing and homelessness.
Anyone else wants to speak to that? Vesna, maybe?
Yeah.
I would say one thing maybe. I'm moderately optimistic in long-term perspective, and if I would think about what is to change, is in a general broader perspective, we need a new attitude, an attitude that would allow us to talk about issues like LGBTI APF homelessness as not as an ideological issue, but just as what it actually is, a matter of social policy that should be treated with the recognition that this is a social problem, no matter that is not just ideological, because this is the huge obstacle on our way to change the situation. That all that we are talking about in regard to social policy issues is that it's directly stuck in political context, but it should be not seen just like that. And this is something that I want to change.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely build on that, Emilia. We're seeing the same problem here in Slovenia, so we're definitely want to work on national development of LGBTIQ plus targeted services, because we believe that the national context and ministries should support the development and sustainability of the services on the grounds. But we, at the same time, we also strongly believe that national level solutions are not enough, especially in this time of political unrest and uncertainty. And so we really want to work more towards European policy strategies that will support our work, but that will also allocate funds to the cause and help create this network of organizations that will boost the movement, because now I think we're all dislocated and fighting for our own cause, but when we will come together and start working as one, we will be much stronger.
Yeah, I think my colleagues said it all. I would just also build on what you said, Vesna, as well, in terms of wider advocacy and awareness raising. And I'm thinking that it's important to work with policymakers and funders and service providers, and not only for inclusive policies and services for homelessness, but I'm thinking about poverty as well and all kinds of inequalities, so that policymakers and service providers and funders see that homelessness is not a separate issue. It is connected with domestic violence, with sexual violence, with racism, with socioeconomic inequalities, with poverty, and all these issues have to be tackled. So it's not something separate and small. I'm thinking about the importance of supporting the movement, actually, the LGBTI movement, and resilience, and strengthening their capacities, because unfortunately the burden is overwhelmingly on LGBTI communities and the movement. So I'm thinking about ILGA Europe and the possibility to find the ways to support you who are working out there. And also, just the same, resource mobilization and the need for funding, and not only for service provisions, but also for research, for advocacy, for communication, for training, for campaigning, for awareness building, that these resources might be also very varied. So you can feel that we can work on different issues and tackle the problem from different angles. And obviously also cross what my colleagues mentioned, unexpected allies, the cross-sectoral collaboration, that it's not only LGBTI organizations that have to carry this burden, that other organizations who are working on homelessness or governmental organization or all kind of allies have to come on board as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We're actually moving towards the end of this conversation, so just to let you know, and but we do have a few minutes for if anyone has any burning final comments or additions. You're very welcome. No? Well, I think that last round really summarized it well, so thank you all for those reflections as well. I think you really summarized what we've talked about today, and I think you've highlighted both the need for cross-sectoral collaboration, the intersectional approach, and I hope we can take this conversation forward. And then I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today. It was really, really interesting to hear from your experience and your reflections. And I wish you all a happy Pride Month going forward as well, at the end of June.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for today.
Bye.
Hei. Tusen takk for et flott arrangement. Og det neste som skjer her